Hello everyone, welcome back to this video. This video we are going to be talking about coffee beans. In this kind of time of COVID and with all the coffee shops that I know of having to close, coffee roasters are going to need your help even more so now. There are plenty of websites out there so you can buy coffee from independents. A lot of the websites are really helpful as well, helping you to pick the right coffee for you. I'm going to talk about some of the points that you should know when you're going to buy coffee, just because at the moment you can't go into your local coffee shop and ask your barista what kind of coffee you should go for. So let's start this episode with talking about what is coffee. So coffee is the most traded item in the world just after oil. In the UK, we go through about 50 million cups a day, which is about 1.7 billion a year. And that's just in the UK. Globally, we go through a lot of coffee. Coffee is grown on a plant, a bit like a shrub or a bush, and it grows a little cherry. It is picked when it's ripe, and then it will go through a few different processes to get the husk and the pulp and stuff off, and then it will then get dried. There's a few different processes. There's a natural and there's a washed process. If you'd like more information about how the coffee goes through its processes from the farm all the way to your cup, I can make a separate video on that. Just leave a comment down below. The coffee is grown around the coffee belt, which is around the equator basically. Coffee is kind of grown in these areas and then it will go through these different processes to dry it out. They will then get bagged up and then they will get shipped out to the country where you're going to get them roasted. Arabica versus Robusta. There are two main strands of coffee that we kind of drink around the world. One which most people have heard of, and that's Arabica. Arabica is a very, very popular strand of coffee. So Arabica coffee is grown at higher altitude levels. This does quite a lot of things for the coffee. Higher altitudes you have less oxygen, so less oxygen kind of helps the flavours and the coffee kind of develop a little bit more slowly. You get more complex flavours going into the coffee. Because it's on higher altitude and because it's got less oxygen, it means it takes a little bit slower to develop and to actually grow. Sometimes the farming can be a little bit more difficult as well because it's higher altitudes, but the main perks of Arabica is that it tastes delicious. It's got much more complex flavours. Robusta coffee. So Robusta is another strand. It's one of the other main strands of coffee that people will drink. This coffee is usually grown at lower altitudes. So lower altitudes mean it has more oxygen, which means that the yields are higher. It also has about twice the caffeine content as Arabica. But the downsides of this, because it's grown at lower altitudes, it doesn't have the complex flavours. It doesn't taste as good as Arabica coffee. There are some big companies out there that use a mixture of Arabica and Robusta beans because it means that they get the higher caffeine level from the Robusta, but the better flavour coming through from the Arabica. Personally, I am more of a fan of Arabica, so I think generally speaking you're going to get a much nicer coffee. I think you're going to have to do a lot more searching and probably spend a lot more money trying to find good Robusta coffee. Out of Robusta and Arabica, I would definitely choose Arabica. Beans versus ground. In another video I'm going to be talking about coffee grinders. I think it's a very essential piece of kit that I think you should invest in if you want to make better coffee at home. The advantages of beans versus ground. With beans, they last a lot longer because they have less surface area, so they don't degrade and oxidize as quickly as ground. One of the other advantages is if you, depending on your brew method and depending on where you're getting your coffee from, you need a certain type of grind for the certain type of brew method. And we'll go through that when we start doing some brews. If you buy a pre-ground coffee that is meant for espresso, It's only really good for espresso. You can get away with it a bit for a mocha pot. That coffee is not, you're not going to get the best out of that coffee if you want to do an AeroPress or a V60 or a French press, because they need much coarser grinds. So if you're someone who's a bit like me and you have two different, or you have multiple ways that you like to brew coffee, getting the beans and a grinder means that you can change different things so you can get the best out of your coffee for the brew method that you're choosing. Ground coffee, there are websites out there where you can ask for them to grind it for the certain brew method that you prefer. So if you don't want to make that investment, try and go for one of these websites where they'll grind it for your needs. Light versus dark. So for light versus dark, we are going to be talking about the roast. This is another quite important element to look at when you're buying coffee. Roast can kind of vary from quite light to very dark. The lighter the roast you have, the more acidity and the more complex flavors and the more sweetness you're going to get from your coffee. The darker your roast is going to be, you can have less acidity, less complex flavors, more kind of roasty burntness to it. Me personally, I like to go for a medium light to light kind of roast. I prefer getting more kind of floral and fruity notes from the coffee, and you just don't really get that from a dark roast. The longer you kind of roast your coffee, the more of the flavour the farmers have spent so long trying to get into the coffee just kind of goes. When you come to buy your coffee, quite often they will have flavour profiles, so it kind of gives you a little hint of what kind of coffee you're going to be going for. So you just kind of need to work out whether you prefer something a little bit more floral, a little bit more citrusy, a little bit more fruity, or whether you like something a little bit more caramelly, or you like something a little bit dark and a bit more roasty. If you've got a bag of coffee that you've enjoyed, have a look at the label, have a look to see what their flavour notes are. So in summary, coffee is a wonderful thing. If you treat it right and if you buy the right beans, you can get wonderful coffee from it. Over the next few episodes, we'll be going through different grinders, we'll be going through different brew methods. I hope this video is informative and I hope it helps. Keep an eye out for my next video where we'll be talking about grinders. Hope everyone's staying safe, and I will see you in the next video. See ya!